You've known someone for years. They seem like a good egg, but something inside you hesitates. Eckhart Tolle discovered why. A person's true character isn't found in their words, but in 3 critical moments, where the ego simply can't maintain its facade, and 99% of people completely miss these signs until it's too late. For years, Eckhart Tolle observed a pattern. People could appear enlightened, generous, conscious, until they were tested. Mask slipped, not dramatically, not obviously, but in 3 revealing situations that expose the deepest structures of the ego. Here's what nobody tells you. You've probably already seen these signs and brushed them aside, because the ego is sophisticated. It doesn't reveal itself in grand betrayals. It shows itself in micro-behaviors, that seem perfectly normal, but now, you're going to learn to see through the illusion. I think that reveals someone's true character is something most people consider trivial, but Tolle insists. If you pay attention here, you'll see the entire structure of a person's ego, in seconds. How does this person treat those who can offer them nothing? I'm not talking about public charity. I'm not talking about performed kindness when others are watching. I'm talking about the waiter who spills your water, the janitor you pass in the hall, the customer service rep who makes a mistake, Tolle explains. The ego feeds on hierarchies. When someone interacts with someone they consider inferior, the ego relaxes its control. It doesn't need to impress, It doesn't need to seduce, so the truth escapes. A behavioral psychology study, published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology in 2023, confirms what Tolle teaches. Researchers observed 847 individuals' interactions with service workers. They found that behavior in these interactions predicted with 94% accuracy how the person would act in intimate relationships when conflicts arose. Think about that, 94%. How someone treats a stranger who made a small mistake reveals exactly how they'll treat you when you mess up. At that moment, their ego isn't trying to conquer you, it's just being. But there's more, and it changes everything. Tolle observed something during his lectures that shocked even him. People who seemed present, conscious during the teachings, would completely transform, and something didn't go as expected. And then he realized. The second thing that reveals someone's true character is even more precise than the first. How does this person react when nitrogen monoxide one acknowledges them? Not criticism, not rejection, but total indifference. Invisibility. The ego needs to be seen, it needs to be validated. Without validation, the ego either collapses or attacks. And it's here that the mask completely disintegrates. Tolle recounts in his book *A New Earth*, about a revealing moment, a woman who always appeared balanced, spiritual, at peace, went to a meeting where her ideas were completely ignored, not rejected, ignored. If she didn't exist, she left the room and exploded in anger, Not against the people, against the universe. This happened to me, she cried. I'm so evolved. And Tolle says, that's the scream of the ego uncovered. Because the ego disguised as spirituality, is even more dangerous than the obvious ego. It thinks it is transcended, but it's just learned new tricks. Neuroscience research from Princeton University in 2024 shows what this happens. When the brain doesn't receive expected acknowledgement, the amygdala activates the same survival threat circuits. The ego, not being seen, is like dying. So it fights, or flees, or freezes, and you can see it in seconds, Someone shares an accomplishment, and nitrogen monoxide one reacts. Watch. The truly present person will smile to themselves and move on, The person dominated by the ego will repeat the information louder. They'll seek validation elsewhere. They'll become resentful. Let me give you a specific case that Tolle witnessed. Silent retreat. A participant who considered herself very spiritually advanced shared a profound meditation experience. Total silence in the room. No one reacted because they were practicing silent presence. Exactly as she should have been. She became visibly tense. She started to elaborate more to add details, try to capture attention. And still no one reacted. She stood up and left, The group wasn't on her spiritual level to understand, Tolle said later. There was the spiritual ego, in its purest form. She didn't want to share. She wanted to be seen as special. And when the universe didn't cooperate with that narrative, the ego revealed itself completely, not in malice, but in desperate need for recognition, disguised as spirituality. And here's what's devastating. We all do this. Maybe not so dramatically, but we do. Have you ever posted something on social media and kept checking the reactions? Have you ever told the same story to 3 different people until someone reacted the way you wanted? That's the ego seeking fuel. And there's nothing wrong with that. Problem is when we don't see it, when we believe we are our achievements, and we need others to validate that, to feel real. Because when we depend on external recognition, we hand over our power to anyone who decides to pay attention to us. Tolle has a simple but brutal practice for this. He calls it the anonymity test. Something good, something creative, something valuable, and don't tell anyone. Don't post it, don't even mention it. And watch the agony that arises. That agony is the ego screaming, but what about my credit? How am I going to prove my worth? And when you can do something extraordinary and genuinely not need anyone to know, you've entered freedom, because you're no longer held hostage, by the opinions of others. You act from presence, not from the ego's need, but. Hold on, because the third test is the most powerful, and it's what Tolle considers infallible. How does this person react? When you set a boundary, here's the brutal truth that no one wants to hear. Healthy boundaries are kryptonite for hungry egos. Tolle explains this devastatingly in asterisk, the power of now asterisk. When you say nitrogen monoxide to someone, you remove the ego's food supply, and the ego will react, always. The only question is how. A conscious person will respect your no. They might even thank you for the clarity, because they don't need you to feel complete. But a person dominated by the ego, they'll do one or more of these things. Blame you, play the victim, punish you with silence, emotionally manipulate you, question your sanity, or try to negotiate until you give in. Here's the insight that changes the game. They don't do this consciously. The ego operates on autopilot. That's why you can't argue with it. That's why explanations don't work. The ego isn't listening. It's just looking for loopholes to reassert control. A fascinating 2022 study published in the Journal of Person analyzed patterns of toxic relationships. They discovered that 89% of destructive conflicts started when one person set a boundary, and the other reacted with what they called ego defensive resistance. Not because they disagreed with the boundary, but because the boundary itself threatened the ego's narrative. Let me give you a real example. A man tells Eckhart Tolle during a workshop that he told his mother he couldn't visit her every weekend because he had time for himself. A reasonable request, communicated with love. The mother cried. She said he didn't love her, that she had sacrificed everything for him. There was probably another woman manipulating him. In 15 minutes, she transformed a healthy boundary into a soap opera of betrayal and abandonment. Al asks, was she listening to her son? And her ego was fighting for survival. As if her son can say no, control disappears, and the ego needs control like a lung needs air. But here's where it gets really interesting. Tolle realized that there are layers of reaction to boundaries, and the layer someone operates from reveals exactly how unconscious their ego is. Layer 1, direct attack, explicit anger. How dare you after everything I've done for you? That's the most obvious reaction, and curiously the most honest. At least you know where you stand. Or 2, victimization, I just wanted to help. You always reject me. I'm never enough for you, Here the ego tries to manipulate through guilt. It turns your boundary into cruelty. And if you aren't conscious, you'll apologize and remove the boundary. Layer 3, silent punishment. The person doesn't argue. They just disappear emotionally, or treat you with coldness, or are giving to others what they used to give to you. See it, that's the ego saying, if you don't feed me, I'll show you what you lose, Layer 4. Rational invalidation. You're being too sensitive, That doesn't make sense. You need therapy. Here, the ego attacks your sanity. It wants you to question your OWN judgment. And if it works, you'll never set boundaries again, because you'll think the problem is you. Layer 5, strategic counterattack. The person accepts the boundary, but starts setting absurd boundaries with you in retaliation, or brings up your old mistakes. The ego is saying, you want to play the boundary game? I'll show you how it's played, and Tolle says, these layers are the ego fighting for survival. The only difference is the level of sophistication, but the origin is identical. The person is identified with the ego, and their ego needs you in a specific way to feel complete. When you say no, you break that illusory completeness, and the ego goes into survival mode. Now, a truly present person They hear your boundary and respond with something like, "Thank you for telling me. I respect that, or I understand. Let's find another way." Or simply okay? No drama, no counterattack. No making it about them. Because the present person doesn't need you to feel whole. They're already complete. Their yes is present. Their no is present. And they respect the same in you. And here's the test that never fails. If you set a healthy boundary and the person reacts with any of the 5 layers of the ego, you know exactly what you've got. Not an evil person, but an unconscious ego. Unconscious egos can't do healthy relationships, present to relate to. Now comes the part that most people miss. And this is crucial. These 3 tests aren't about judging others. They're about seeing clearly. Because when you see clearly, you can choose consciously. Tolle doesn't say, cut these people out of your life. He says, stop expecting unconscious egos to act consciously. When you see the ego operating, you don't get shocked. You don't get hurt. You simply see. And seeing without judging creates space. Space for compassion, space for healthy boundaries, space for authentic relationships with who is truly present. But there's a paradox here, and it's going to turn everything upside down. While you're observing these 3 tests in others, the ego is observing you too, making exactly the same assessment. How do you treat people who can't give you anything? How do you react when no one recognizes you? How do you handle it when someone tells you no? Tolle insists. The signs you look for in others are the same signs that reveal your own level of consciousness. Every judgment you make is a mirror. Every reaction you notice is a teacher. Stanford research on confirmation bias shows that we tend to see in others exactly what we don't want to see in ourselves. If you're obsessed with identifying narcissists, where is the unacknowledged narcissism in you? You're afraid of manipulation. Ask. Where do you manipulate subtly? This isn't guilt. This is awakening. Because the ego isn't the enemy. The unconscious ego is the problem. And the only way to make the ego conscious is to observe it without defense. Tolle calls this the inner observer, that part of you that can watch your own thoughts and reactions. Without identifying with them. When you develop the observer, the 3 tests become tools of self-awareness, not weapons of judgment. Let me give you a practical example of how this works. Tolle tells about a moment when someone criticized him publicly in an unfair way. He noticed a thought arising. I need to defend myself. This thought came with tension in the chest. Heat in the face. An impulse to counter-argue. But instead of acting on the thought, he observed the thought. Realized that wasn't true about him. It was the ego feeling threatened. And when you just observe the ego without identifying with it, something surprising happens. The emotion arises. Hits its peak. And dissolves. In seconds. With no action necessary. This isn't repression. Repression is pushing the emotion down and pretending it doesn't exist. Observation is allowing the emotion to exist fully, but without believing the story it's telling. And when you don't feed the story, the ego loses fuel. And that completely changes how you use the 3 tests. No longer looking to validate suspicions. You're just observing reality. That person treated the waiter waitress with contempt. Observe not with judgment, with clarity. And from that clarity comes a conscious decision about how to interact with that person. Tolle calls this conscious response versus unconscious reaction. Reaction is automatic. Someone fails the test, and you immediately label them. Shut down, attack back, or cut them out of your life. That response is intentional. You see the behavior, recognize the pattern of the ego, and choose, do I set a boundary here? Do I step away? Do I have compassion, but not engage deeply? Each answer is valid depending on the context. But they all come from presence, not reaction. And then something extraordinary happens. You stop attracting unconscious people. Not because you reject them, but because your frequency changes. Hungry egos look for other egos to fuel the conscious presence attracts conscious presence. Phenomenon that Eckhart Tolle mentions regarding this. He calls it vibrational incompatibility. You're operating primarily from the ego. Resonate with other egos. The conversations are about grievances, dramas, gossip, competition, mutual validation. There's a dance where each ego feeds the other. But when you begin to awaken, Those interactions start to feel empty, tiring, and you naturally begin to drift away. Not with judgment, but because there's no longer resonance. Like trying to tune into a radio station that's changed its frequency, you only get static. And then you encounter people operating in presence. And the connection is immediate effortless, because presence recognizes presence. And from these connections, real relationships emerge, not based on mutual ego need, but on mutual recognition of being. Now, let me show you how to apply this today, not theoretically, but practically. Test 1. How do you treat people who can't give you anything? Experiment for today. Pay attention to how you treat the next person who serves you in some way. The waiter, waitress, the Uber driver, the store clerk. Don't try to be nice. Just observe how you normally act. Do you make eye contact? Do you thank them genuinely? Or on autopilot, do you get impatient if they make a mistake? Do you treat the interaction as a transaction or as a human connection? Don't change anything, just observe, because the ego hides in behaviors that we consider normal. Seeing is the first step to awakening. Test 2. How do you react when no one recognizes you? Experiment for today. Share something you consider important in a conversation. It could be an accomplishment, an idea, an experience. And observe what happens internally if the person doesn't react the way you expected. Does your body tense up? Do you feel an urge to self? Do you become resentful? Do you take it out on someone else? Don't suppress the reaction. Don't judge the reaction. Just observe. The inner observer has no agenda. It just sees. And seeing without reacting dissolves the ego pattern automatically. Test 3. How do you react when someone sets a boundary? Experiment for today. When someone tells you nitrogen monoxide today, pause. Just 3 seconds. And observe what arises. Anger? Fear? A desire to convince them? Thoughts like, they're selfish. They don't understand me, They'll pay for this? Those thoughts are the ego and panic. And seeing the panic without believing it is freedom. Eckhart Tolle says something powerful. The more you observe the ego, the less you are the ego. Observing and being are mutually exclusive. If you are observing, you are not what is being observed. Here's the practical result. When you apply these 3 tests to yourself, your ability to see clearly in others becomes laser-like, not judgment, clarity. And clarity is compassion in action. But there's one last level, and it's where most people get stuck, because it requires something that the ego considers unacceptable. After learning to see the ego clearly, self and in others, the temptation is to use this knowledge as superiority. Look how conscious I am. Look how unconscious they are. Eckhart Tolle calls this the spiritual ego. It's the ultimate trap, because the ego can disguise itself even as awakening. It can use teachings of presence to create a new identity. I am the awakened person. I see what others don't see. Suddenly, you're back in prison, just with different decor. True consciousness does not create hierarchy. It doesn't feel superior. It just sees. And seeing includes seeing your own tendency to transform perception into identity. Recent research from the University of Michigan on spiritual development identified what they called spiritual bypassing, using spiritual concepts to avoid real emotional work. And they found that people highly familiar with non-ego teachings often had even more inflated egos, just disguised in spiritual language. Eckhart Tolle has a devastating story about this. A man approached him saying, "I've studied all your books. I meditate 2 hours a day. I completely understand that the ego is an illusion, but my wife still doesn't get it. How do I make her awaken?" And Tolle responded, "You've just demonstrated that you haven't understood anything, because your ego now identifies as the awakened person trying to save the unconscious wife. You haven't transcended the ego. You've just given it a new spiritual costume." The man was offended, defensive, and then he paused and started to laugh because he saw it. He saw the ego doing exactly what Tolle described, and seeing was already the beginning of dissolution. That's the paradox of spiritual work. The more you try to be spiritual, the more the ego strengthens with the identity of being spiritual. But when you simply see the ego without trying to fix it, without resisting it, without identifying with it, it loses power. It doesn't disappear, but it stops commanding your life. And here's something crucial that most people... Tolle isn't saying you should eliminate the ego. That's impossible while you have a body and live in the world. The ego has practical functions. It helps you navigate the world. Make decisions, protect yourself. Problem isn't having an ego. Problem is being completely identified with the ego. It's thinking that you are only the ego. When you say, "I am a lawyer, I am a mom, I am successful," I'm hurt. You're talking about the ego. These are temporary identities, roles you play, not who you are essentially. And when you realize, I have an ego, but I am not the ego, freedom begins, because you can use the ego when necessary, but you're no longer a slave to it. It's like knowing you are on stage playing a part, instead of believing you are the character. And the 3 tests reveal exactly that, not just in others, in you. They show when you are identified with the ego, and when you are operating from presence, and that awareness is transformative. So the final test is, can you see the ego operating without feeling better than the person dominated by it? If not, you're still in the ego, just a more sophisticated ego. Yes, if you truly can see with compassion, then you've entered something that Tolle calls witness consciousness. You are present, and from that presence, healthy relationships, clear boundaries, and deep peace emerge naturally. You have the 3 tests. How someone treats those who can't offer them anything. How someone reacts to being unrecognized, How someone responds to boundaries. More importantly, you have the 3 tests to observe your OWN awakening. So the real question, ISN single quotes T. Are the people around you going to pass the test? The real question is, are you willing to use these tests as mirrors? Because every person who fails the test, showing you where you are still asleep. And when you wake up, you realize there are nitrogen monoxide toxic people. There are only unconscious egos operating on autopilot, and your only responsibility, is to wake up. Not to fix others, not to convince, not to change. Just wake up. Because an awakened ego isn't offended by sleeping egos. It simply sets boundaries with compassion and continues to be present. And that presence is the true test of character. Not theirs, yours. Just uncovered the 3 tests that reveal the true character of anyone, including yourself. This knowledge isn't theoretical, it's transformative, but only if you apply it. Most will watch and forget. Some will judge others with it, but a few will use it as a mirror for their own awakening. When you click the super thanks button below, you're not paying for information, you're saying, I am part of the FEW, who take awakening seriously. Your position and your presence in the world, and that matters, because the more people who awaken individually, the more the collective consciousness elevates. You are not a spectator, you are a guardian of conscious presence. And guardians support the work of awakening. Now comes the final application, and it's where everything connects. You can use these 3 tests immediately. You don't need to wait, You don't need to study more. You just need observation changes everything. Next time you interact with someone you depend on emotionally, family, partner, close friend, observe. How do they treat people who don't matter to them? If there's disdain there, eventually, there will be disdain for you, Not because they're evil, but because the ego doesn't discriminate. When the ego feels threatened, or bored, it attacks, or it despises, always. Observe. How do you treat people who don't matter? Because if there's contempt in you, it will out. And conscious people will step away, not with judgment, but with clarity. Next time you share something important, and don't get the reaction you expected, pause, just 3 seconds, and ask, what in me needs this reaction? What am I trying to prove? To whom? These questions dissolve the ego on the spot. Because the ego doesn't survive genuine investigation. It only survives when it operates in the dark, unquestioned. And next time someone sets a boundary with you, treat it as a gift. People who can say no with clarity and love, are rare. If you react with respect, you've just passed the most important test of consciousness. Eckhart Tolle says something that changed my life. He says, the relationship isn't about finding the right person. It's about being the right person. And being the right person means seeing your own ego clearly, without defense, without excuses, and observing until it loses control over you. We show you how this manifests in practice. There's a woman named Sarah who shared her story with Tolle. She spent years in toxic relationships, always attracting the same type of person, charming at first, controlling later. She read books on narcissism, studied red flags, went to therapy, and then she started applying the 3 tests to herself and realized something. She treated herself with contempt when she depended completely on external validation to feel valuable. She couldn't set boundaries because she was afraid of abandonment. Everything she saw in the toxic partners was a mirror of what she did to herself. She didn't attract narcissists by accident. She resonated with them because her own internal ego operated on the same patterns. Constant internal criticism, need for approval, fear of being alone. When she saw this, not with guilt, but with clarity, everything changed. She stopped looking for the perfect partner, started working on being present with herself, treat herself with the same compassion she wanted to receive, to validate herself internally, to set boundaries, even with fear. And 6 months later, she met someone completely different, not because she looked better, but because she became different. And when you change your internal frequency, you automatically change who resonates with you. That's the real power of the 3 tests. Not identifying toxic people, but revealing where you are still sleeping, ... Because every difficult person in your life, ... is a teacher, showing you exactly where you need to awaken. Realize you're not looking for signs of toxicity in others anymore, because you're too busy maintaining presence in yourself, and from that presence, healthy relationships appear. Not because you sought them out, but because you became the type of person who attracts consciousness. There's a final practice that Tolle teaches that integrates all of this. He calls it ... the mirror meditation. Every time someone irritates you, ... hurts you, or frustrates you, ... pause ... and ask ... where in me? Just the same pattern that I'm criticizing in this person. This isn't about blaming yourself, it's about using each difficult interaction as a portal to self-knowledge ... If someone is being controlling, and it deeply irritates you, ... ask ... where do I try to control? Maybe you don't control people the same way. Maybe you try to control circumstances ... or outcomes, or how people see you. If someone seeks attention constantly, it irritates you ... ask ... where do I seek attention in more subtle ways? Maybe not dramatically ... but maybe through achievements, or through helping others, or through being the most conscious person in the room. Every irritation is an invitation ... to look inward. You look honestly, without defense. You discover that there's no one to judge out there, because everything you see in others ... exists some form in you ... And seeing this isn't humiliating, it's liberating. Because it means you're not a victim of difficult people. You are the creator of your experience, and creators have the power to change. There's a practice that Tolle teaches that closes this circle perfectly ... he calls it radical acceptance of the ego and others, not agreeing ... not allowing abuse, but stopping to resist internally the fact that unconscious egos exist. Because every time you clash with someone's ego-driven behavior, your OWN ego reacts. And they're 2 egos fighting, and no one awakens that way. But when you see the ego of another, without internal resistance, you create space ... And in that space, you have a choice. To establish a boundary ... to step away ... to speak your truth ... or simply to observe. And that conscious choice ... is freedom. Not freedom from difficult people necessarily, but freedom from the automatic reaction of your own ego. Now you have it all. The 3 external tests, the 3 internal tests, the practice of radical acceptance, and the understanding that all of this is about your OWN awakening, not about fixing the world. So ... the final step is this: commit, not to perfection, but to observation. For 1 week. Observe these 3 patterns in yourself. Don't try to change them. Just observe and note down what you perceive, because what you perceive today will seem obvious in a week, but it will be devastatingly revealing right now. Observe. Share controversial statement: the quest to identify toxic people is the ego's greatest trick, because while you're judging someone else's ego, your own ego is strengthening itself with moral superiority. Agree or disagree, and be honest. How many times today have you failed one of these 3 tests? Comment below. I'll be responding to everyone in the first 2 hours, because this conversation is where the real awakening happens. Not in the theories, but in the honest admissions of still being asleep.